Hello and welcome to the Saratoga Power Lunch. I'm Yan Zhao, the Mayor of Saratoga. Saratoga Power Lunch is a monthly webinar series on the second Tuesday of the month from 12 p.m. to 12:30 p.m. that gives residents a chance to learn about Saratoga in bite-sized pieces. Today's webinar will feature Pastor Erik Swanson. We'll be talking about celebrating diversity in Saratoga. Pastor Swanson joined Westhope Presbyterian Church in Saratoga in 2006. Over the years, the congregation has steadily and organically grown and deepened. It has become an intentionally contemplative, inclusive, and spiritually vibrant ministry that is a place of calm and communion in the heart of the ultra-fast-paced Silicon Valley. Pastor Swanson is also the chair of the Saratoga Ministerial Association, which is comprised of representatives from the communities of faith in the city of Saratoga. The Saratoga Ministerial Association has helped us build community across the many faiths and cultures that are represented in Saratoga through events like the annual Celebration of Light and the monthly living room conversations, which create a safe environment for people of different opinions to discuss difficult and sometimes polarizing topics. The challenges of 2020 and 2021 have demonstrated how important it is to build a community that celebrates the diversity of cultures, race, and faith, and perspectives. I have been so proud of the way that our community has responded. In June 2020, our community stood against racism during a Black Lives Matter rally at the Saratoga Civic Center. Earlier this year, we came together again during a Stop Asian Hate rally that I organized. Just last month, our community made another clear statement that racism has no place in Saratoga after xenophobic remarks made by a member of the Planning Commission. Many residents reached out to the City Council to express their outrage. Like me, these community members were shocked that a leader in our community made comments that are so out of sync with the values of the City Council and our community. Though the planning commissioner has resigned, this incident was a clear reminder that there is more work to do. For that reason, I'm so happy to be joined by Pastor Erik Swanson today to talk about celebrating diversity. Erik, thank you so much for joining us today, and the floor is yours if you'd like to begin.
Thank you, and thank you for the introduction. Thank you for having me today. It's good to be with you. Frankly, I didn't even know this was happening. So this is a great introduction for myself as well to Saratoga and the multifaceted community really that we are. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to talk about diversity because clearly this is an important topic in today's world. We see it on the news all the time. Many of us feel it in our lives all the time. And just going into the grocery store in Saratoga, we can see diversity of folks who come to shop together. And many of us haven't been, from our upbringings, really haven't been taught or trained how to deal with folks that are different from us and others from us. And so clearly it's something that we have to face into. The racial awakening from Black Lives Matter over the last 2 years or so has been in some ways revolutionary, just in the sense that it's brought a lot of us into an awareness of what's been real for folks for hundreds of years. I mean, just because we haven't experienced it doesn't mean that others haven't experienced racism or difficulties in their everyday lives because they're different. And so how we deal with diversity is super important. And not only diversity, but then we can be diverse, we can still be in our individual silos or still in our small groups and never relate with one another. So if we can combine diversity with inclusivity, how do we build friendships? How do we relate to one another? How do we respect one another? And what we found on the Ministerial Association that I'm really grateful to be a part of is that we can respect each other's differences and still hold on to what's important for us. We can be inclusive without having to conform to one another's religious practices, but we can honor them, say, hey, they're different, but man, there's a lot there that we can learn from, a lot that we can be together in. I moved here in 1976, moved to Saratoga in 1976 with my family. And it's been good to see a great shift over those many years. It's great to see some diversity on the city council. So well done, Mayor and everyone else, to see a change from what really was, in my reading, a really white-dominated society to be more diverse, to be more inclusive. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about that today. You mentioned living room conversations, which has been going on now for about 5 years, where we've really worked to provide a safe space for people to talk and listen to each other, to respect one another's diversity and differences, and hopefully learn from each other. The Saratoga Ministerial Association has been doing an interfaith Thanksgiving service for years and decades now, actually. And it has been put together and then maintained as a place that respects the differences and the uniqueness of the different faith groups, and yet to model something that we can all come together in our diversity and still be unified, still, I mean, for us, still worship God, still listen for God's calling, and be one in that. And I know that sometimes, because of our upbringings, it's hard to overcome that which we've been taught, which is that siloing or that sense of being different and focusing on the differences. But boy, can you imagine the power that we could find if we could get together in a unity and express our commonality as human beings? So that's a lot of what we're shooting for in the Ministerial Association. And I think I've found that in the City Council as well, as you all have worked with us. I've really been pleased to hear your engagement in that with us over time, and previous mayors, I will say also, to build Saratoga into a more diverse community and respecting that diversity as well. So thanks for having me. I look forward to the conversation today.
Well, Pastor Swanson, thank you so much for your remarks. Before today's webinar, we asked our attendees to submit questions. So I'm just going to start with the questions. Okay. The first question is, how well are we doing as a city as far as celebrating the diversity we find within it? Have you found prevalent respect?
Yeah, so it's interesting because asking a middle-aged white man like myself may not be the best way to gauge how the city is doing. And I think we can look at several different layers in the city to say on some layers, I think we're doing really well. I think we found a lot of cultural celebrations have found a home in Saratoga, and people have respected that. So there's a great sense of diversity in those things and a welcome and people exploring those things. I also know that one family of Mexican heritage that I know was yelled at on the street just while they're walking to Starbucks. That's not okay. And so on some levels, we have a lot of work to do. When the Ministerial Association was trying to get the homeless taken care of in Saratoga, there's a great pushback by some folks of, well, we really don't want them in our neighborhoods. Well, once we start doing an us and them, we're not celebrating diversity anymore. We're othering people. So an interesting question is, for Saratoga, who do we want to keep out and who do we welcome? And I would wonder if, instead of asking me that question, if we got a panel of different people of color, how would they answer that question? That'd be fascinating. I know that in the current housing element, as Saratoga has wrestled with this idea of having to do and provide more housing, that we wrestle with that question underneath it also. Who do we want in and who do we want to keep out? Because diversity is not just culturally, it can be everything from racially to financially to ableism. How able are we? How able are our bodies? It's sexually, it's religiously. So in some ways, Saratoga does pretty well. And in some ways, I think Saratoga has a long way to go. And I hope that that's not a bad thing for us. I hope we can embrace that as a challenge to say, okay, where are those places we still need to keep growing? Where are we? How do we do that internal work of looking at who we want to keep out or who do we not want to come into Saratoga? Why is that? What's going on within us that points out our biases, that points out our in and out groups? I know that I have found a lot of prevalent respect was part of the question. But again, I'm a middle-aged white guy, and there are a lot of us who get a lot of respect shown to us, and that's what our culture generally has taught us to do. But it's not me that needs that respect. It's, you know, my homeless brother and you know, the Jewish congregation who has had threats of violence against it. So all those folks, the Muslim Association, you know, has dealt with a lot of threats. I mean, I think those really go to how we're doing. And to ask that question continually, I think is really helpful.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us. I'd like to add that too. You know, I personally feel that Saratoga is it's pretty good at celebrating diversity, you know, compared to before. But I know that there's more we can do. On October 25th, the City Council will be discussing our Code of Ethics, mission statement, and value statement with our city commissions. Our commissioners advise the council on a variety of topics and help us stay connected with our community. So I really hope that together we can chart a path forward that reiterates that the leadership of our city stands with our community in opposition to racism. So I hope you know, we all can work together on these issues. The second question, since joining Westhope in 2006, what do you think has helped improve inclusivity in Saratoga the most?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I'm impressed with is I do think Saratoga has come a long way. And like I said, and you've just echoed, has a long way to go. I think building relationships is one way to do this. And I think that being in the Silicon Valley and having, in some ways, the world come to us in this area has helped it's kind of forced us to be more inclusive. It's pushed our inclusivity a lot. I think the city leadership has done a good job of really reaching out to different groups to make them feel included. I know that I don't know. I hope that the Ministerial Association has helped Saratoga as well, as we've modeled a respect, modeled how to be community together, one with another. I know that when I sit down with my friends from the synagogue and from the Muslim Center, Muslim Association, and different religious groups, different Christian groups, and we can sit and have really good conversation, that models something that's powerful. And I would hope that all of us, some of us been taught deep roots of our divisions, of how the Christian church shouldn't talk with the Jewish folks and the Jewish folks and the Muslim folks. And no, I mean, all of that is, I think it's antiquated, frankly. And I think in my language, that makes God weep. And so how can we all come together to find our commonality? And I think Saratoga is in a good place to do those kinds of conversations, do that kind of listening. The celebration of light that we've now done for 3 or 4 years, I think 4 years now, honors all the different religious traditions and models that how do we look for and find light, which is a symbol for the divine and in many of our religious backgrounds. How do we celebrate that? There's something we have in common. And can that bring us together and help us listen past the divisions that we have learned, that many of us have learned?
Well, thank you. Here's another question. What are some of the positive effects of diversity in our community?
Yeah, so this is one that I don't think gets enough play. We tend to look at the problems, but the diversity helps us open ourselves really to new ideas and to the world. One of the things I think of myself is I'm an adventurer. I love to go on adventures. And instead of going off into the world to find different ideas and to see different sites, what if I just really work on listening to different people and hear their different ideas, their different experiences, their different backgrounds? I mean, it broadens myself out so much. And that's not just true for me, but I think it's true for all of us who engage with a diverse group of people. We get to have our worlds broaden. Our community, I think, becomes stronger because of this. We get built up by different ways of seeing things or doing things. I know if you had to look through my eyes for all your decisions, Madam Mayor, things would not go well. But you bring a different set of skills and gifts and leadership than I do. And if I can learn from that, then I think we all get better because of it. Like, do we take those opportunities? Do we take those opportunities to respect the differences, respect the diversity, and then allow it to build a more holistic vision of who we can be as for us, for a church or for the synagogue or for the city, and let that broaden us out so that we can become bigger and broader individuals, have our worlds expanded, but then also a stronger community as well.
Well, thank you. That's very, very wonderful. Thoughts to share with people. I think a lot of times people, don't see the value of diversity. I think it's important that we kind of highlight that, the positive effects of diversity. Yeah.
Yes.
Another question. As a pastor or as a leader of the Saratoga Ministerial Association, have you ever handled a situation when someone didn't see value in diversity? Were you able to help? Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, sorry.
Were you able to help them see some of the positives of our environment that welcomes and celebrates diversity?
Yeah, so the reason I jumped in a little early was I love this question because absolutely, and sometimes it happens daily, because people, I think people often have a hard time seeing the value of diversity. They've been taught the divisiveness, they've been taught judgment, they've been taught, oh gosh, those other people, instead of seeing the wonder of them, they see how different they are and they push them away because of that. And, so I think we deal with that within ourselves. I mean, I think racism, there's a big part of racism that has to do with that. And one interesting example that I had was at our celebration of light, which is supposed to, hold us together and celebrate all the different faith groups. Almost every year, I have someone come up to me who's frustrated that we're not singing all Christmas carols? So this is a very tangible answer to the question. And if we only sang Christmas carols, what would that say about how we respect other religious groups? Because I would only be singing songs from one particular religious background. And so we try to sing several different songs, and songs that can be inclusive and maybe embodied by more people than just one religious group. And so I always try and listen to the person to see where they're coming from, and then try to explain what our goal is, what our intention is, how we can look for our commonality to see the holy together. And I think the question was, part of the question was, how does that work? They're mixed results, I got to tell you. I mean, sometimes it goes really well, and people can say, oh, I get it. And there's that kind of epiphany or that new understanding or a renewed understanding. Like, oh yeah, we do have that in common. And sometimes people stomp off and they're angry. The same is true with the inner work that a lot of us have to do being in a racist country, is that we have to do our own work, our own internal work. And as a spiritual leader and as a leader in the Ministerial Association, that's one of the things I'm trying to encourage people to do, is their own internal work. What stirred in me when I'm pushed in my diversity? What stirred in me? What pushes back against that? And that work, I think, is hard work. I'll give people a lot of credit. It's hard work, but it's work that needs to be done if we want our culture, our country, our world to move forward and to be more inclusive.
Thank you so much for those wonderful advice. And the next question is, how can we as individuals help create a more inclusive community and promote diversity?
Yeah, I think that at the risk of repeating myself, to do our own internal work. A lot of us haven't been taught how to do that. So I encourage you to find a life coach, a guru, a spiritual director, somebody, a mentor of some sort to help you in that. But how do we notice what's happening in us? Because a lot of it is our own insecurity. Somebody says something, or I run up against somebody who's different from me, and I get insecure. They've stirred something in me. Well, if I can look at that, if I can do the work to unpack that, that helps the whole community get better. So that'd be one thing, our internal work. And I could talk more about that if you want me to. But I'd also suggest that people try and take a small risk by getting to know somebody better. Take a small risk and have a conversation with someone you wouldn't normally have a conversation with. Be curious. Wonder about that person. Try to find out about that person. Where did they come from? What was important to them? That helps us become more informed. It helps us to broaden ourselves. And in that conversation, I'd encourage you to be curious. Be curious. Wonder. You don't have to be defensive. Just be curious. What is it about this person that's unique, that's wonderful, that's amazing? And try to be okay with getting uncomfortable. Some of us have to get past our fragility, but it's okay to be uncomfortable. Just be okay with that. You don't have to defend yourself. You don't have to pummel somebody or attack somebody. It's okay to be uncomfortable, but then do the inner work. Why are you uncomfortable? What's that about? What's a deeper sense of self trying to make known to you?
Thank you. I think you sort of answered my next question, but I'm going to say anyway, if you have anything to add. What's the best way to learn about the different faith and the cultures of Saratoga?
Yeah, they are similar for sure.
Yeah.
But one of the silver linings, I mean, COVID has been a terrible time for so many people. I get that. There's a great grief that comes with it that I don't think that many of us have fully dealt with. But one of the silver linings of it is that almost all of the religious groups in Saratoga are online now. So you can stay in your comfortable jammies or your robe or whatever you want. You can have your feet up in front of your iPad or computer, and you can actually go visit these houses of worship and check them out and see. And you sign your name on the Zoom screen however you want to, but you can go check them out. And again, be curious. What moves in you? What place of worship or what idea sparks in you? I'd encourage that same kind of curiosity about the different cultures in Saratoga. When there are different cultural events, try to go visit, ask questions, see what's there. Find somebody who you know is a different culture. Sometimes just in our neighborhoods, we don't even know our neighbors, and they're from around the world. And so if we meet some of our neighbors, just start saying hi, and then move that into a conversation, all of a sudden we're building community and learning about others.
Thank you. The next question, how have you handled racial, religious, or cultural tensions in your role as a pastor or as a leader of the Saratoga Ministerial Association?
Ooh, yeah. So it's a multi-pronged approach. First, I try to listen a lot. I try to be patient with people to try and draw out of them what's really happening within them to help them identify that. But there's also times like when I wrote to you about the woman on the planning commission, where we have to assert boundaries and call people and public figures, particularly to accountability, and say, this isn't right. We need to be able to say that. And so sometimes those tensions are about listening to diffuse. Sometimes they're about pushing back and saying, this is not okay, here's the boundary. Oftentimes it's about calling to accountability. And often for me, it's about taking a risk or what feels risky to stand up for something that I know is right, that could cost me. And yet it's still got to be done. We still have to face into that to try and hold a vision of wholeness for ourselves, for the person in front of us, but maybe sometimes for the people or the groups that we're defending or setting boundaries for, to protect, and a larger vision for our community that, gosh, don't we want this to be a more peaceful, more just, more vital and vibrant community, city, world? It's going to take us working at that.
Thank you. One last question. How do you suggest approaching a sensitive conversation with someone who may have different opinions than yours?
So my suggestion is to ask questions. Try to be curious. You can stand firm in what you believe, meaning you don't have to let somebody swamp you with their belief. You don't have to cave in to their beliefs or understandings. But then again, at the same time, you don't have to put your stuff on somebody else. You don't have to make them or try and convert them or try to get them to think the same way you do. And so if we can go in with some equal sense of power, maybe in the conversation, and again, being curious, asking questions, I think all of that goes to a very, to help in sensitive conversations.
Thank you so much. Do you have a final remarks or message you'd like to share with our community?
Yeah, I guess I'd really encourage Saratoga to embrace, to work on embracing everyone that we meet. Not through judgment, try to set aside our judgment, set aside our condemnation, set aside some of this, my word, and forgive me for this, but some of the garbage that we've been taught through time, to really see the person for who they are, to meet them, look at them eye to eye, and embrace them as a unique expression of life in this world. I think that would be super helpful. And then to do your own internal work. We have to get over ourselves. We really do. We have some exclusivist tendencies in Saratoga. We got to get over that. We got to get over it and notice all that stuff in us and try to start doing our work to heal from it and become more whole human beings.
Oh, Pastor Swanson, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so grateful to you and the Saratoga Ministerial Association for strengthening our community and building greater appreciation for our diversity. So thank you so much for everything you do.
Thank you. You're welcome. And thank you so much.
Thank you. Just want to let people know that a recording of this webinar will be posted on the city website. You can also find the topics for upcoming webinars there. Our next Saratoga Power Lunch will be on Tuesday, November 9 at 12 p.m. I hope you can all join us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.